the thing about legacy is that it, in a way, gives you the advantage of being subconsciously part of an intergenerational audience. The other is the challenge to stay relevant and adapt to changing times. That's perhaps the predicament that the IOC and the Olympic extravaganza finds itself in the middle of. I'm Shereen Bhan. We're in Lausanne, the Olympic capital of the world. This is the IOC headquarters. This is where all the decisions get made. I'm here to speak with Thomas Bach, the president of the IOC, the man who is in charge of running this organization and has been for over a decade now. The question, though, is what is the role and the relevance of the Olympics today? How does the Olympic evolve as we look at the future? More importantly, what's the role and relevance of India in the Olympic story? Join me as we find out. We talk about the future of the Olympic Games and, the legacy that you carry forward. How challenging is it today for you to be able to envision a future for the Olympics, given the fact that we're dealing with geopolitical tensions, geopolitical conflict, we're dealing with a war quite literally in your backyard here? There's economic uncertainty, economic challenges as well. And that begs the question, how relevant are the Olympics today? How do you respond to that?
Now, we have to keep the Olympic Games relevant, and you can only keep such an organization relevant by emphasizing the values and by sticking to the values. If you're wavering with the values, then you're gone. And we have been talking right now about some of the core values. It's about peace, it's about understanding, it's about human excellence. And it's about solidarity among all the 206 National Olympic committees. And this we have to address, and this we have to inspire with the young generation. That's our mission. Political neutrality is one of the core tenets, along with transparency, trust, respect, that you just spoke of. But you also believe that while the Olympics and the IOC need to be politically neutral, you're not necessarily apolitical. What does that mean exactly? And in the context of the challenges that you're dealing with today, for instance, a decision on whether Russia or Belarus should be part of the next Games or not, how does that guide your decision? Now, you have to acknowledge the reality, and the reality is the world is run by politics, and this is the system, and that you need, in order to get your values across, to get your organization respected, you need a cooperation with politics. You cannot say, we have nothing to do with politics. We are living on an island or in a bubble all alone. This was some of, I called it once, a lie of the past, of some sports officials who said the sport have nothing to do with politics and nothing to do with money. Both is wrong. We have to cooperate with politics, and we have to have a dialogue with politics. And in this dialogue, we have to ensure that politics is respecting our autonomy, our neutrality, and in this way enabling us to make our contribution to make the world a better place through sport. Otherwise, if we are getting politicized, this contribution will be gone. Then there will be no worldwide solidarity anymore. Then there will be no rules which apply for everybody in sport on this planet anymore. And there in this dialogue,
Yeah.
You always have to convince these political leaders about this.
You know, speaking of persuasion and convincing, and I understand that you want to ensure the universality of the games as well as ensure that there is solidarity, which, as you just spoke, is one of the guiding principles. But are you then any closer to taking a decision on whether Russia and Belarus should be included, how they should be included, should they be included as neutral or not? I understand that a decision is likely to be taken in a few days from now.
No, then you would know more than me. I don't think that the final decision will be taken in a few days from now, but I think you have already a clear indication on the way how we see it with the recommendations we have been giving to the international federations, meaning no teams, no anthems, no colors, no whatever national identification with regard to Russia and Belarus. But on the other side, giving the opportunity to the athletes who do not support the war and who are not linked to the military or to other services there in Russia or Belarus, to compete as strictly individual and neutral athletes, but not as representatives of their country. And this is a system where we see now working in world championships, in continental championships, in World Cups, and which in the meantime I think is accepted. Also, the Ukrainian side is not 100% happy about this, but they have accepted it, and because it's an opportunity for the Ukrainian athletes to qualify for the Olympic Games and to have what we all want, a strong Ukrainian team in Paris 2024. And there I can come back to the values, because there are again at the base of our decision. We have on the one hand the Russian government who wants us to ignore the war. We have on the other hand the Ukrainian government who said you have to totally isolate everybody with a Russian passport. Both is not possible with regard to our values. Both is not possible with regard to human rights. It's not possible with regard to the Olympic Charter. And this is how we arrived to this formula to protect the human rights of these individual athletes, but to punish the Russian state, the government, for breaching the Olympic truce and with this the Olympic Charter. And on the other hand, for Ukraine, they're opening up in all solidarity, all the opportunities where we are supporting many thousands, in fact, of Ukrainian athletes and their entourage to be able to continue to live their Olympic dream.
One of the other Olympic values, President Bach, that I want to talk to you about, and you've said this previously as well, that the Olympic Games is not a business model. It's not about maximizing revenue, and whatever revenue you do make, 90% of that is reinvested into athletes as well. But there has been a fair degree of concern, of skepticism, of criticism as well on the cost of the Olympics, the kinds of overruns, the debt trap that host countries have found themselves into, the white elephants that have been created on account of the Olympics and how sustainable that is. And I know that under your presidency, under your watch, you have taken measures and you have taken steps to ensure that you try and bring the costs down and you try and address some of these concerns. Do you believe that you've been able to move the needle legitimately on some of these issues?
I think so, that we have moved the needle. You know, if you take as an indication the interest we have created in the Olympic Games, then you can see that with regard to the Summer Games, we are maybe in the most favorable position ever. We have already now allocated the Olympic Games for 28 to Los Angeles and for 32, means 9 years from now, to Brisbane in Australia. And already now for 2036, we have a two-digit number of interested countries. And some of them even saying, listen, we are there for 36, but if we don't make it for 36, we will also be there for 40. And this has never happened before. You know, we are now in 23, and that there are national Olympic committees, regions, cities want to enter into a dialogue with us 13 years before the Games in such a big number.
Because of the reforms that you've done to change the way that the bids were working?
I guess that the reforms cannot be that bad if you have so many, so many interested parties.
You know, you talked about double-digit interest from potential host nations. And I want your comments on a statement that came in from one of the cabinet ministers in India, the Information and Broadcasting Minister, Anurag Thakur, who said that India will support the IOA's decision to bid. He used the word bid, but to potentially host the 2036 Olympic Games. Has there been any dialogue, any conversation with India?
Yes, we had sometimes a dialogue, and there were different indications from both the National Olympic Committee and but also from the government side. And this is a great news for the entire Olympic movement. You know, India is the most populous nation on this planet. India with let's say, a starting to flourish sports movement going beyond the more traditional sports, and also embracing more and more Olympic sports. That's a real welcome initiative by India.
So is this dialogue likely to continue in a formal fashion when you come to Mumbai as part of the IOC session?
That's just up to India. Here, our doors and our hearts are wide open.
But do you believe that there's a strong case to be made for India at this point in time as a potential host?
Yes, there is a strong case for the reasons I'm giving. You know, seeing how India is flourishing, is developing, and how India now is embracing Olympic sports. So there is a great potential for both. India can, you know, play a much more important role in the Olympic movement, and for the Olympic movement to have such a growth potential like with India is of course very welcome.
You know, since we're talking about India, I must ask you whether the possibility of cricket being included in the LA Games are we closer to a decision? Do you believe that would make sense as well?
No, it could make sense. You know, I cannot hide that I'm really a fan of cricket. I was even playing once.
You were playing cricket?
No, I was doing one in Fiji. We were walking across a sports field, and there was women playing cricket in Fiji. And then my spokesperson, who is an ardent fan of cricket, he came and said, now you have to play. So we went to this women's cricket team, and they allowed me there to play with them for some moments. Now it's in the hands of the organizing committee of LA to make a proposal, and then once we have this proposal, then the IOC Executive Board will take a decision. And
soon, I imagine.
From today on, it should be exactly a week.
In a week's time. But given the large interest that cricket generates, the eyeballs involved, the format, the T20 format, which is much more acceptable now to a larger audience, this should be a sort of, a six, wouldn't it, if it were to be included, to use the cricketing analogy?
Yeah. Now, of course, the T20 format was necessary. With the traditional format, we could not have accommodated cricket in the Olympic program. But with the T20 format, this would be very possible. So let's see when the proposal is coming. I think you can imagine from my answer what my answer to such a request would be.
Yeah, I can see you're voting yes on this one, but as you pointed out, we'll have to see. Sustainability is a big focus for you, and that's part of what you're hoping to address as well for the Games. Starting with Paris, a big focus on being able to make the Paris Games more sustainable. How confident do you feel in being able to achieve the targets that you've set out for yourself? For Paris to start with, and then, of course, being climate positive by 2030. Yeah.
No, first of all, the Olympic Games Paris 2024 are the first ones which are organized, from the start to the delivery according to our reform program of Olympic agenda. And that means that these games will be not only more sustainable, they will be more inclusive, they will be more urban, they will be younger, and for the first time we will have full gender parity among the athletes. With regard to sustainability, the first indicator is already that 95% of the facilities to be used are existing or temporary. And this is exactly what we wanted to achieve with our reforms. In LA, this will go up to 100%. And the remaining 5% in Paris, most of it is the Olympic Village. And this is clearly not a cost of the Games, but this is one of the most welcome investments in the suburbs of Paris, where housing and affordable housing is desperately needed. With regard to the carbon footprint, there the goal in Paris is to cut the carbon emissions in half compared to the average of the Games in London and Rio de Janeiro. So there, I think we're on a good way to achieve this. And that would mean that we are going even beyond the goals of the Paris Agreement on carbon emission reduction.
In many ways, 2024 and Paris is going to be the start of an experiment that you're hoping can be replicated over the next several decades. But I want to address back the budget issue with you because, the difference between the operational budgets as well as the infrastructure budgets that the hosts will have to take care of. And how does that now sort of work itself out, given the cost overruns that we've seen in the past, whether it was London or Tokyo? I mean, how is this going to be able to be sustainable as we move forward? And explain the math between the operational budgets as well as the infrastructure budgets.
Now, there is already a kind of a mistake in the thinking. to speak about the infrastructure budget as a cost of the games. You know, if there in the past there had improvements to be made for an airport, an Olympic village to be built, which afterwards serves for tens of thousands of people as housing, then to take these kind of investments as cost of the games, which have to be written off, you know, in 16 days to zero, is just not reasonable. It's just not reflecting the truth. And there, yes, there were the overruns, but we also know from studies, you know, there were not bigger overruns than in any public projects which are taking 7, 8 or 10 years. For this reason already, you have to clearly separate this investment budget compared to the real organization budget of the games. And the organizing committees in all the recent games have at least broke even with their budgets. And there you do not take into account all the positive effects economically the games have. You know, the number of jobs being created, the influx of tourists, the taxes to be paid. There we have an estimate for Paris, which is about $8 billion only and direct on revenues generated directly by the games, which is more than the entire organizational budget, which again is balanced also thanks to a contribution of the IOC in the amount of about $1.5 billion.
But there have to have been lessons learned. I mean, you just gave us an example of Paris and the kind of revenue that could accrue to Paris on account of the Games. But then there's also Greece, and there's several other countries that have had to deal with the impact, the economic impact of hosting the Olympics. What have been the big lessons there, and what is it in terms of further course correction that you would like to implement?
Now, there, I think the major course correction we have made is that we established a clear priority in our approach. In the past, we said in order to allocate the Olympic Games to a city or a country or a region, this city has to adapt to the Games. So here are the conditions, and you have to tick it off. If not, we are very sorry, we are going elsewhere. This we have totally turned around. We are saying now the Games have to adapt to the city. So there are, for instance, you don't find anymore any kind of request from our side. The stadium has to have this capacity or other of these kind of requests. And then we said adapting us to the host means also, first of all, you have to make use of existing facilities as far as possible. If there are no existing facilities for a certain sport, then you have to look into a temporary facility for not leaving any white elephant. If also this, for sustainability reasons, or financial reasons is not feasible, then you may look for such a facility either in the rest of your country or even in a different country. And this is what has been, greatly embraced there by hosts and also, by interested cities for future Olympic Games. I think that's the biggest change we can see, and so far we can be satisfied with the results.